The fortress stood on the edge of a broken valley, its walls scarred with the marks of endless battles. Smoke rose in the distance where the swarm had struck earlier that morning. The sound of distant explosions still echoed across the barren land, a reminder that peace was far away. Inside the fortress, men and women moved quickly, repairing weapons, checking supplies, and preparing for the next wave. There was never enough time. Marcus sat in one of the small workshops, his hands busy with a task that required both focus and patience. The room was dim, lit only by a few lamps powered by the last reserves of energy cells. In front of him lay the battle armor of Sirenia, his comrade and closest companion in this war. The armor was cracked in several places, its surface burned from plasma fire and scarred by claw strikes. He had been fixing armor for months now, but this set was special. It belonged to her. Sirenia sat nearby, silent as always, her tall frame tense but calm. Her species, known as the Veyari, were warriors by nature. They believed strength was honor and silence was discipline. She rarely spoke unless words had meaning. Marcus respected that about her. He had fought with many soldiers, both human and alien, but none like her. The workshop was quiet except for the sound of Marcus's tools scraping metal. He removed a cracked plate, polished the surface, and fitted a replacement piece. His hands were steady, though his mind wandered. Every time he worked on Sirenia's armor, he thought about how many times it had saved her life. And every time he wondered how many more battles it would endure before it finally broke. "You should rest," Marcus said without looking up. His voice was calm, almost casual. "I will rest when I fall," Sirenia replied. Her tone was soft but strong. Marcus gave a small smile. That was a typical answer from her. He tightened a bolt, then leaned back for a moment to stretch his tired arms. The war had aged him faster than the years should have. His reflection in the metal surface showed dark circles under his eyes, but he pushed the thought away. There was no space for weakness here. After a while, Sirenia shifted slightly. Her deep golden eyes watched him closely. She seemed to study him, as if searching for something beyond his armor plates and tools. Marcus felt her gaze but kept working, pretending not to notice. Finally, she spoke. Her voice was lower now, almost a whisper. "Do you love me, human?" The tool slipped in Marcus's hand. For the first time in weeks, his fingers froze. His breath caught in his throat, and the steady rhythm of his work broke. He looked up at her, unsure if he had heard correctly. Her expression did not change. She sat still, her face calm, though her eyes held a quiet fire. The question hung in the air, heavy and dangerous. Marcus's hands trembled slightly as he placed the tool down on the table. He searched for words but found none. He had faced swarm machines that towered over tanks, had run through burning trenches, had seen comrades fall beside him, but nothing had shaken him like that single question. He wanted to answer, but his mind screamed caution. She was not human. She was from a culture he barely understood, a warrior race with traditions older than Earth itself. What did love mean to her? Was it a test, a joke, or something far deeper? Before he could gather his thoughts, the fortress alarms blared. Red lights flashed, and a mechanical voice shouted across the corridors. "Incoming swarm attack. All units to battle stations." Marcus's heart jumped. He glanced at Sirenia. She had already stood, her face set in battle focus. The quiet moment between them vanished, crushed under the weight of survival. "We will finish later," she said firmly, fastening the pieces of her half-repaired armor. Marcus opened his mouth but closed it again. There was no time. He grabbed his rifle and rushed beside her as soldiers flooded the corridors. The fortress shook as the first swarm artillery hit the outer walls. Dust rained from the ceiling and the ground trembled under the weight of approaching machines. The pair reached the main gate, where defensive cannons fired into the dark horizon. The swarm was a shadow moving across the valley, thousands of machines crawling forward like a living tide. Their glowing eyes lit up the dust clouds, their metallic bodies clanging in unison. Marcus and Sirenia took their positions on the wall. Together, they had fought many battles. She was swift and strong, her blade cutting through machines with precision. Marcus was not as fast, but his skill with weapons and his sharp mind for tactics made them an unmatched pair. As the swarm reached the defenses, chaos exploded. Plasma fire lit up the night, soldiers shouted commands, and explosions turned the air thick with smoke. Marcus fired shot after shot, machines falling one by one under his aim. Sirenia leapt down into the fray, her glowing blade tearing through swarm units that broke through the barricades. Marcus followed, covering her from above. His heart pounded with each second. He watched her move, graceful and fierce, as if the battlefield itself bent to her will. She fought not just for survival, but for honor. Hours passed like minutes. The swarm pressed harder, wave after wave, but the fortress stood strong. By the time the final machine collapsed, the ground was littered with broken metal and sparks. Exhausted, Marcus stumbled back into the workshop with Serenia. Her armor was even more damaged now, smoke rising from its cracks. She sat again, silent, as Marcus gathered his tools. His hands shook, not from fear but from the memory of her words. He wanted to ask her what she meant. He wanted to know why she had whispered those words just before the alarm. But the silence between them was heavy. Serenia simply closed her eyes, resting her head against the wall, her expression unreadable. Marcus began to repair the armor again. His hands moved, but his mind was trapped in that frozen moment. "Do you love me, human?" He had no answer. Not yet, but he knew the question would not go away. The fortress smelled of smoke and iron. Its halls echoed with tired footsteps as soldiers returned from the long night of fighting. Some carried the wounded on stretchers, others dragged broken equipment. The medics shouted for space while mechanics rushed to patch weapons before the next attack. Marcus walked slowly down the corridor, his rifle heavy on his shoulder. He had fought through the night, and though his body screamed for rest, his mind refused to settle. The words Serenia had spoken in the workshop haunted him. "Do you love me, human?" He shook the thought away, trying to focus on duty. The swarm would return soon. There was no time for personal questions, and yet whenever he closed his eyes, he saw her face in the glow of the workshop lamps, her golden eyes watching him with that quiet fire. He entered the workshop and found Serenia already there. She sat upright, her armor still scarred despite his earlier repairs. She had fought harder than anyone in the last battle, and her body bore the weight of it. A cut traced her cheek, and her arm was wrapped in a bandage. But she did not complain. She never did. "You should be resting," Marcus said as he put his rifle against the wall. Serenia's gaze shifted to him. "So should you," he chuckled softly. That was the closest she came to teasing. Sitting at the workbench, Marcus picked up his tools and returned to repairing her armor. The cracked chest plate needed reinforcement. He hammered gently, sealing the edges. His hands worked almost on their own. He had done this so many times that it felt natural, but his mind was elsewhere. Every now and then he looked at her. She sat in silence, watching him, her posture straight as if even in stillness she prepared for war. Finally, Marcus broke the silence. "About what you asked me yesterday." Her eyes narrowed slightly. She waited, patient, not speaking, not urging him on. Marcus sighed. "I don't know what you meant. Was it serious? Or was it just something you said in the moment?" For a long while, Serenia did not reply. Then she leaned forward, her voice calm and steady. "Among my people, we do not speak of love lightly. To ask is to bind one's spirit. To answer is to bind in return." Her words sank into Marcus like heavy stones. She had not been joking. She had not been testing him. She had spoken something real, something sacred. He lowered his eyes to the armor, his hands stilling. He could feel his heart beating faster. "And if I don't answer?" he asked quietly. "Then I will wait," Serenia said. "But I will not forget." The silence stretched between them again. Marcus worked on the armor with shaky hands, unsure of how to respond. He felt something for her, that much he knew. But love, could it even exist between a human and a Veiri? And if it could, what would it mean? Before he could think further, the workshop door opened and Captain Reynolds, a human officer, stepped inside. His uniform was covered in dust, his face tired but sharp. He looked at Marcus first, then at Serenia. "Marcus," the captain said. A word. Marcus stood, wiping his hands. The captain led him outside the workshop and down the hall. When they were alone, Reynolds lowered his voice. "You're close to that alien," the captain said bluntly. "Too close," Marcus frowned. "She's my partner on the field. We've saved each other more times than I can count." Reynolds shook his head. "That's not what I mean. I've seen the way she looks at you, and I've seen the way you hesitate around her. Listen carefully, alliances are fragile. The Veiri trust us now, but one mistake, one rumor, and everything could fall apart. You can't afford to blur the line between soldier and anything else." Marcus clenched his jaw. He wanted to argue, but the captain's words cut too close to the truth. "I'm not saying this to punish you," Reynolds continued. "I'm saying it because we need you. You're one of the best engineers we have. If your head isn't clear, people will die. Think about it. With that, Reynolds walked away, leaving Marcus in the dim hallway. Marcus leaned against the wall, rubbing his temples. The captain's warning echoed in his mind. He understood the danger. But even with that knowledge, he couldn't erase Serenya's question. Later that evening, Marcus and Serenya stood on the fortress wall overlooking the valley. The horizon glowed faintly as the sun set behind the mountains, painting the battlefield in red light. Soldiers moved along the defenses, preparing for another night. Serenya spoke without turning to him. "You spoke with your captain?" Marcus blinked. "You knew?" "I could see it in your eyes," she replied. "He told you to stay away from me." Marcus sighed. "He said I need to stay focused, that this war is bigger than us." Serenya was quiet for a long time. Finally she said, "He is right. This war is bigger than us, but that does not erase what is between us." Marcus opened his mouth, but before he could respond, a runner approached them, breathless. "Scouts have returned. The swarm, they found something underground." The soldier handed Marcus a datapad. On the screen were blurry images taken by drones. Machines working deep below the surface, constructing something vast. Huge tunnels stretched under the valley like the roots of a poisoned tree. Serenya studied the images. "A core," she said. "A weapon," Marcus nodded grimly. If the swarm completed it, the fortress would not stand another month. The captain gathered the officers in the command center. The room buzzed with tension as the images played on a hollow display. "They're building something massive under us," Reynolds said. "If it activates, we're finished," the officers argued. Some wanted to strike immediately, sending a team to destroy it before it grew stronger. Others wanted to fortify the fortress, fearing a trap. Marcus listened quietly, but his eyes drifted to Serenya. She stood tall among the officers, her presence commanding respect even among humans who mistrusted her kind. Finally, Reynolds spoke. "We'll send a mixed team. Engineers, soldiers, and scouts. We need to confirm what's down there and sabotage it if possible." Marcus's heart sank as the captain's eyes landed on him. "Marcus, you're the best with machines." "You're going, and me," Serenya said firmly. The captain hesitated but then nodded. "Fine, both of you. But remember, this mission isn't about personal matters. It's about survival." The meeting ended. Marcus and Serenya walked together down the corridor, neither speaking. The weight of the mission hung between them. At last Serenya stopped and turned to him. "You see, human? The war pulls us forward, but it cannot erase the question." Her golden eyes met his. "You cannot run from it forever." Marcus's throat tightened. He wanted to answer her, but the words refused to come. Duty pulled at him. Fear whispered in his ear, and yet his heart burned every time she looked at him. That night, as the fortress prepared for the deep mission, Marcus lay awake in his bunk. The sound of machines outside was distant, but inside his mind the question was louder than ever. "Do you love me, human?" And still he had no answer. The fortress was quiet before dawn. Soldiers moved with hushed voices, preparing equipment for the mission underground. The air smelled of oil, metal, and dust, the usual scent of war. Marcus stood at the armory table, checking the seals on his helmet. His hands moved carefully, though his heart was restless. He had been on many missions before, but this one felt different. They would be entering the swarm's nest, the very ground where the machines were strongest. Few had ever gone there and returned. Beside him, Serenya strapped on her half-repaired armor. The silver plates, though scratched and scarred, still shone faintly in the light. Her tall figure looked unshaken, but Marcus could see the faint stiffness in her movements. She had not fully healed from the last battle. "You should stay," he said quietly. Serenya fastened her blade to her side and turned her golden eyes on him. "And leave you to walk into the dark alone?" "No," Marcus almost smiled. That was Serenya. She would rather face death than abandon a comrade. Still, a part of him wanted her safe, away from the tunnels and the machines waiting below, but he knew better than to argue. Once Serenya chose a path, she never turned back. The strike team gathered at the fortress gate. 10 soldiers in total, half human, half Vayari. Their armor gleamed dully, their weapons ready. The captain gave them a final briefing, pointing to a hologram map of the valley. "Scouts confirmed heavy swarm activity underground," he said. "They're building something big. We don't know what, but we know it's dangerous. Your mission is to go in, gather intel, and sabotage anything you can. Do not try to fight the entire swarm. Get in, get out. The soldiers nodded. Marcus adjusted his rifle, the weight of responsibility pressing on his shoulders. The team moved out as the sky turned gray with morning light. They reached the edge of the valley where a massive crater gaped open. The ground had collapsed into tunnels carved by the swarm. The air was hot and thick with the smell of burning circuits. One by one, the soldiers descended into the crater, their boots crunching on loose stone. Marcus followed close behind Serenia. He kept his eyes on her back, steadying himself with her presence. The deeper they went, the darker it became. The tunnels were alive with faint vibrations like the heartbeat of a machine. Strange lights pulsed along the walls, feeding energy through cables that stretched like veins. Marcus whispered into the comms, "Feels like we're walking inside something alive." "Stay alert," Serenia replied. Her voice was calm but firm. Hours passed as they moved deeper, marking their path with glowing beacons. The tunnels twisted and turned, some wide enough for tanks, others so narrow the soldiers had to move single file. At times they could hear distant clanging, the sound of swarm units working unseen. Finally, the lead scout raised a hand. Everyone froze. Ahead, the tunnel opened into a massive chamber. Machines swarmed across it like ants, building structures that reached high into the cavern ceiling. Towers of glowing metal pulsed with energy, feeding into a central sphere. A giant core half complete but already radiating power. Marcus's breath caught. "That's it!" "That's what they're building." Serenia stepped closer, her eyes narrowing. "If it activates, this war will end in their favor." The team set up surveillance equipment, capturing images and readings. Marcus crouched by one of the swarm cables, studying the energy flow. His mind raced with possibilities, thinking of how to overload or sabotage the system. As he worked, Serenia stood guard beside him. She was silent, but he could feel her presence like a shield at his side. When the readings were complete, the captain whispered through comms, "We have what we need. Let's place charges and retreat." The soldiers split into pairs, planting explosives around the chamber. Marcus carried one charge, Serenia covering him. They reached a cluster of machines, and Marcus knelt to set the device. His fingers moved quickly, wiring it into the swarm's energy vein. Suddenly, the ground trembled. The machines stopped their work. Their glowing eyes turned toward the chamber walls. "They know we're here," Serenia said sharply. "Charges set," someone shouted. The swarm screamed, a metallic shriek that echoed through the tunnels. Machines poured toward them, thousands of them crawling across the walls and floor. "Fall back," the captain ordered. Gunfire lit the chamber. Plasma bolts burned through the dark, and explosions shook the ground. Marcus finished arming the charge just as a swarm unit leapt at him. Serenia's blade flashed, cutting it down before it reached him. "Move, human," she shouted. Marcus ran, his heart pounding. Serenia followed, her blade slicing machines that broke through their line. The team fired as they retreated, fighting their way back into the tunnels. The swarm pressed hard. Soldiers fell behind, dragged down by machines. Marcus wanted to turn back, but Serenia pulled him forward. "Do not stop. We carry the mission." As they ran, the tunnels shook with blasts from their planted charges. Fire roared through the swarm structures, tearing holes in the core. But still, the machines came, furious and endless. At one point, a swarm beast twice Serenia's size blocked their path. Its claws tore through the stone, its eyes burning red. Marcus raised his rifle, but the beast was too fast. Serenia leapt forward, meeting it head-on. Her blade clashed with its claws, sparks flying. Marcus fired at its joints, weakening it. Together they brought it down, Serenia's final strike cutting its head free. She staggered, her armor smoking, blood seeping through a crack in her side. Marcus rushed to her, grabbing her arm. "You're hurt." "It is nothing," she said through clenched teeth. "Keep moving." But Marcus saw the pain in her eyes. He supported her as they ran, firing one-handed at the machines that pursued them. Finally, the team burst into the open air, gasping for breath. Explosions thundered behind them as the last of the charges went off. Smoke and fire poured from the crater, the swarm's construction torn apart. Only half the team had survived. The captain looked at the crater, his face grim. "It's not destroyed. We heard it, but it will rebuild. We'll need a final strike." Marcus sat on the ground, helping Serenia remove her cracked helmet. She winced but forced a faint smile. "You shielded me," she said quietly. "You've shielded me 100 times. Marcus replied. His voice shook. "I couldn't let them take you." Her golden eyes softened, and for the first time she looked vulnerable. "Then you feel it too," she whispered. "The bond between us. Marcus froze, his heart heavy with fear and longing. He wanted to say yes. He wanted to tell her everything he felt. But his throat locked. Duty, fear of the alliance, the captain's warning, they all pressed against him. He only whispered, "I don't know if I can." Serenia leaned closer, her breath weak but steady. "You already have, human. You showed it with your actions." Marcus had no reply. He sat in silence, the weight of her words heavier than the swarm's machines. Around them, the soldiers prepared for the next battle. But Marcus knew that his war was no longer only against the swarm. It was inside his own heart. The fortress trembled under another wave of swarm attacks. Alarms blared, lights flashed red, and the distant roar of machines shook the ground beneath the soldiers' feet. Marcus tightened the straps on his armor, checking his rifle one last time. Sweat ran down his face, mixing with dust and ash from the constant battles. Beside him, Serenia adjusted her blade. Her movements were precise, practiced, almost effortless despite the injuries she still carried from the tunnel's mission. She did not speak, but Marcus could feel her presence beside him like a shield. They had returned from the underground mission only to find the swarm regrouping faster than anyone expected. The assault this time was different, organized, relentless, almost personal. Every machine seemed to know where the humans and Veyari were stationed. Marcus glanced at her, concern flickering in his chest. "You're hurt. You shouldn't fight like this." Serenia's golden eyes met his, calm and steady. "If I do not fight, they will win. This is not about us, human." He opened his mouth to argue, but another explosion shook the wall near them. Soldiers screamed as metal debris fell around them. Marcus fired his rifle automatically, taking down 2 swarm units advancing toward the barricade. The fortress was alive with chaos. Cannons fired from the walls, soldiers shouted orders, and the ground shook with the impact of the swarm's machines. Marcus's heart pounded, not just from fear, but from the tension of what he felt for Serenia. Her question haunted him. "Do you love me, human?" And it would not leave him even in the middle of war. Hours passed like minutes. Marcus and Serenia fought side by side, covering each other as the swarm pressed forward. She moved with grace and strength, her blade cutting through machines faster than Marcus could reload. Yet every time she looked at him, there was a silent question in her eyes, and he felt it deep in his chest. During a brief lull, Marcus dragged her behind a broken barricade. Smoke curled in the air, and the faint orange light of fires reflected off their armor. He saw the fatigue on her face, the strain of fighting with wounds that had not fully healed. "You're pushing yourself too hard," he said, his voice low. Serenia shook her head. "If we fall, it is not just me who dies. Do you understand, human? This war is bigger than us." He knew she was right, but his mind was torn. Duty demanded that he fight, that he protect the fortress. But another voice inside him screamed for honesty, for the truth he had buried for too long. "You don't have to carry it alone," he said softly, glancing at her. "We fight together. Always." Her eyes softened for a moment, a flicker of something almost human in her gaze. "You have strength, human. Not just in your hands, but in your heart. I see it." Before Marcus could respond, the alarms blared again. The swarm had breached one of the outer walls. Machines poured through, clawing and smashing anything in their path. Soldiers fell back, shouting, firing, and trying to hold the line. "Move!" Marcus shouted, firing his rifle as he and Serenia charged toward the breach. The battle became a blur of sparks, smoke, and metal. Marcus ducked under a falling beam, his heart racing. Machines came from every direction, yet Serenia's blade moved like lightning, cutting a path through them. Marcus covered her flank, shooting rapidly, feeling a strange sense of calm despite the chaos. Amid the fight, Marcus noticed a large swarm unit heading straight for Serenia, faster than any they had encountered. Without thinking, he dove toward her, taking the full weight of its strike. Pain exploded across his arm, but he kept firing. Serenia turned, her blade flashing, and together they brought it down. She leaned against him briefly, breathing heavily. "You could have been killed," she said, her voice both scolding and worried. "I couldn't let them touch you," he replied, his voice tight with emotion. For the first time, words failed him no longer. The flood of fear, relief, and something deeper, something he had denied, overflowed. Marcus looked at her, really looked at her. She was not just a comrade, not just a warrior. She was everything he had ever needed, standing right beside him in the heart of battle. I love you," he finally whispered, almost to himself. Serenia froze for a moment, her golden eyes widening slightly. Then she stepped closer, her blade lowered but her gaze unwavering. "So it is true," she said softly. "You feel it, human?" Marcus nodded. "Yes, I tried to deny it, tried to put duty first. But I can't anymore. Not when you're here." A loud explosion shook the wall behind them. Marcus and Serenia were forced back into the fight immediately. But the words had changed something between them. They moved together, each covering the other with renewed energy, their bond strengthening every strike and every shot. The swarm pressed harder. But Marcus noticed the soldiers fighting with more coordination, inspired by the human Veyari duo. Marcus realized then that love and trust were as much a weapon as any cannon. Hours later, the assault slowed. The outer walls were damaged, but the fortress still stood. Marcus and Serenia stood on the highest point they could find, surveying the battlefield. Smoke rose from the valley and fires burned where the swarm had been stopped. Soldiers cheered quietly, but the battle was far from over. Serenia turned to Marcus, her golden eyes catching the dying light. "You spoke the words," she said, "and it changes nothing in the fight, but it changes everything in our hearts." Marcus felt his chest tighten. He had feared this moment, feared the consequences of admitting his feelings. Yet now, with her acknowledgement, he felt stronger, braver, more certain. He realized that in the middle of war, admitting love was not weakness. It was the strongest choice he could make. "We will face the swarm together," he said. "No matter what comes next," Serenia nodded. "Then we fight as one, human." The captain approached, his face grim but relieved. "The swarm will rebuild. We need a plan for the next strike. The core they're building underground is still active. You two will lead the next mission. You've proven yourselves today." Marcus glanced at Serenia. Her expression was calm, but he knew the fire in her eyes was sharper than ever. They had survived together, admitted their feelings, and now faced the next challenge as a team stronger than before. That night, Marcus repaired Serenia's armor again. He worked carefully, his hands steady but his mind filled with warmth. Serenia watched him silently, no words needed. Their hearts had spoken enough. Outside, the fortress slept fitfully, soldiers exhausted from the fight. Marcus and Serenia sat quietly together, the weight of the world pressing on their shoulders. Yet something lighter and brighter blossomed between them. A bond stronger than fear, stronger than the swarm. Marcus looked at her and finally his hands no longer froze. "We survived this war," he said softly, "and we survived together." Serenia smiled faintly. "Then it is settled." And for the first time in a long time, Marcus felt truly at peace, even knowing the swarm still waited below, ready for the next attack. They were not just soldiers, not just warriors, they were allies, friends, and something far more. They were partners, bound by trust, courage, and the promise of something precious amidst the chaos of war. The valley below the fortress was quiet, almost eerily still. Smoke and ash drifted on the wind, remnants of the last swarm attack. Marcus checked his rifle and the explosives strapped to his back. The mission today was clear. Infiltrate the underground core and destroy it before the swarm could complete their ultimate weapon. Failure meant the fortress would fall and the alliance would be crushed. Serenia stood beside him, her armor polished and repaired from the previous battle, though faint scars remained as reminders of what they had endured. She looked at him silently, her golden eyes reflecting both determination and trust. Marcus could feel the weight of her gaze and it steadied him. "This is it," Marcus whispered. "One chance." "We cannot fail," Serenia nodded. "Then we fight as one." No hesitation. The strike team moved out, human and Veyari soldiers marching together through the crater's edge toward the hidden tunnels. The sun had barely risen, casting long shadows across the valley. The deeper they went, the darker it became. The tunnels felt alive again, humming with energy from the partially constructed core. Strange lights pulsed along the walls, feeding into the massive sphere of metal and energy far below. Marcus adjusted his helmet and took a deep breath. His mind was focused, but he could feel Serenia's presence beside him. Strong, silent, ready. They reached the first chamber where swarm machines patrolled tirelessly. Marcus crouched behind a pile of rubble, checking the movement patterns. "We move together," he whispered. "Once we start, there is no turning back." Serenia's hand brushed his briefly, a silent reassurance. Marcus felt warmth in that touch. He had fought alongside her for months, but this time it was different. They were not just comrades, they were partners, bound by trust and something deeper. The team split into pairs to plant explosives around the chamber's support structures. Marcus and Serenia worked together, weaving through the shadows as machines moved in calculated patterns. Every step was precise. One misstep could trigger alarms. "Almost there," Marcus whispered, setting a charge near a structural beam. He glanced at Serenia. "Cover me!" Serenia raised her blade, moving like a shadow. Sparks flew as her weapon clashed with an approaching machine, cutting it down before it could reach him. Marcus planted the final charge, his hands steady despite the adrenaline surging through his veins. Suddenly, the ground trembled violently. The core seemed to respond, its energy pulsing faster. Machines poured into the chamber from multiple entrances, faster and stronger than any before. "Run!" Marcus shouted. They sprinted through the tunnels side by side. Marcus fired his rifle, taking down machines that broke through the team's formation. Serenia moved like a whirlwind, her blade slicing through metal, clearing the path for the others. One of the swarm beasts, enormous and covered in sharp plates, blocked their route. Marcus raised his rifle, but its armor seemed impervious. Serenia stepped forward without hesitation. "Move, human!" she shouted. Marcus ducked behind debris as she leapt toward the beast, striking with precision. Sparks flew as metal clashed. Marcus aimed at its joints, weakening the creature. Together they brought it down. Serenia staggered but remained standing, breathing heavily. Marcus rushed to her side. "Are you okay?" he asked, worry tightening his chest. "I am fine," she said, though her voice betrayed fatigue. "We must go, now." They continued through the twisting tunnels, following the glowing paths that led to the core chamber. Explosions from the planted charges shook the walls, and the swarm machines screamed and faltered. Yet the core's energy pulsed stronger, its glow filling the cavern like molten light. Finally, they reached the central chamber. The core towered above them, an immense sphere of metal and energy, its surface alive with glowing circuits. Marcus's breath caught. He had never seen anything so vast. One miscalculation, one wrong move, and it would all be over. "Place the charges," the captain's voice echoed through comms. Marcus moved carefully, connecting the explosives to the core's energy veins. His hands moved quickly, every motion calculated. Serenia guarded him, slicing down any machine that came too close. A swarm of machines suddenly emerged from the shadows, surrounding them. Marcus fired relentlessly, but they were too many. A clawed machine leapt toward him, and he froze for a split second, until Serenia struck it down, her blade cutting through the enemy with deadly precision. "You trust me?" she asked, her voice calm but firm. Marcus nodded. "Always." They fought side by side, their movements perfectly synchronized. The machines fell one by one, but more kept coming. Marcus realized that to destroy the core, they might have to risk everything. "I have to get closer to the center," Marcus said. "The charge must connect directly." Serenia's eyes narrowed. "Then I am with you." Together they moved toward the glowing heart of the core. Machines tried to stop them, but nothing could break their determination. Marcus connected the final explosive, setting the timer. "Go," he shouted. They sprinted back toward the tunnel exit. Explosions began behind them, shaking the ground violently. The core ignited, energy flaring as the charges detonated. Marcus and Serenia barely made it through the collapsing tunnels, dust and debris falling around them. Outside, the sky was filled with smoke and fire as the underground core collapsed in a massive explosion. The swarm's structures were destroyed, their ultimate weapon gone. The valley was quiet again, the echoes of destruction fading into the distance. Marcus fell to his knees, breathing heavily, his hands shaking. Serenia knelt beside him, her armor scorched but intact. They looked at each other, exhausted but alive. "You did it," she said softly, a faint smile on her lips. "We did it," Marcus corrected, his voice trembling. "Together." For a long moment they sat in silence, listening to the distant sounds of the surviving swarm units retreating. Marcus finally reached for Serenia's hand, holding it gently. His hands no longer froze, no longer hesitant. "Serenia," he whispered, "I love you. I have always—" But I was afraid to say it. Her golden eyes softened and she pressed her hand over his. "I knew, human. Your actions spoke louder than words, but now I hear it." The weight of unspoken feelings lifted. Marcus felt warmth spread through him, stronger than any weapon, stronger than fear. Around them, the Alliance soldiers began to regroup. The fortress still stood battered but undefeated. Marcus and Serenia rose, looking at the horizon where the sun set in red and gold. painting the valley with the colors of both war and hope. The captain approached, nodding in approval. You've done more than we could have hoped. The core is destroyed. The swarm's plan is ruined. Marcus glanced at Serenia. She smiled faintly, her golden eyes shining in the fading light. Do you love me, human? She whispered again, softly, almost shyly this time. Marcus's heart swelled. This time his hands did not freeze. He smiled, taking her hand in both of his. Yes, he said simply. I love you always. Serenia's smile widened. She leaned closer, resting her head briefly against his shoulder. For the first time in months, the war, the battles, the endless struggle, all of it faded into the background. In that moment, only they existed, two hearts bound together amidst the chaos. The Alliance celebrated their victory, but Marcus and Serenia remained quietly together, knowing that while the war was not over, they had found something stronger than fear, stronger than duty, love and trust. As night fell over the valley, Marcus helped Serenia repair her armor once more, his hands steady, his heart full. She watched him silently, her eyes reflecting gratitude and something deeper, hope. Outside, the fortress rested. Soldiers slept, the fires burned low, and the stars shone above. Marcus and Serenia stood together, looking toward the future. They had faced the swarm, faced death, and emerged victorious, not just as warriors, but as partners. No matter what battles lay ahead, they would face them together. Their bond, forged in the fires of war, would never break. And for the first time, Marcus knew that some victories were not just about survival. They were about the courage to love, even when everything else demanded fear. The frozen answer had finally thawed.